I first noticed something wrong with my neighbor on a quiet evening when nothing special was supposed to happen. It had been one of those calm nights where you can hear your own breathing, where the world feels still enough that even small sounds stand out. I remember stepping out onto my porch just to get some fresh air, thinking about work and life, and then hearing a soft, strange scraping sound coming from the house next door. It wasn't loud, but it felt out of place, almost like someone dragging something across the floor in slow, uneven pulls. At the time, I didn't think much of it. People do weird things at night. But something about it settled in my mind and refused to leave. My neighbor, Mr. Hale, had moved in only 3 months before. At first glance, he seemed like the kind of person you barely notice. Quiet, polite, the type who keeps their head down and avoids unnecessary conversations. He looked older than he probably was, with deep-set eyes that always seemed tired and a way of smiling that felt like he had to think about it before doing it. Nothing about him screamed danger or mystery. He was just ordinary. And maybe that's why the little odd things I started noticing didn't make sense. Ordinary people don't act like that. The first week after he moved in, I tried being friendly. I waved, he waved back. I said good morning, he nodded. But every time his eyes met mine, even for a second, it felt like he was studying me, like he was silently calculating something. I brushed it off back then, telling myself I was just imagining it. People can seem off when you don't really know them yet. But things didn't stop there. Every night, around the same time, I would hear soft noises coming from his place. Not loud enough to call for help, not strange enough to tell myself something was definitely wrong, but strange enough to make me pause whatever I was doing. Sometimes it sounded like quiet talking, almost like he was whispering to someone. Other times, it was that dragging sound again. And on one night, I swear I heard something like a muffled thud, followed by complete silence. I tried to ignore it. Everyone deserves their privacy. Maybe he was just clumsy. Maybe he had a pet. Maybe he liked late-night projects. I told myself all the things a normal person would say, but deep inside, curiosity was already building. The neighborhood wasn't the kind of place where people stayed strangers for long. We shared food, checked on each other, borrowed tools. But no one really talked to Mr. Hale. Some neighbors tried, but he always brushed them off with short answers. Others said he preferred staying alone. A few joked that he was mysterious, but it was the harmless kind of mystery people like to attach to someone who simply keeps to themselves. Nobody suspected anything more. Then one evening, something happened that I still can't forget. I was coming home late, walking past his house, when I saw him standing behind his living room window. The lights were off inside, but the street lamp outside cast just enough glow for me to see him. He wasn't doing anything, just standing perfectly still, staring out toward the street with this blank expression. His eyes weren't moving. His face wasn't moving. It was like he was frozen. I stopped walking without meaning to. Something instinctive told me not to get his attention, so I stayed quiet and kept moving until I reached my own porch. When I finally looked back, he was gone. The next morning, he waved at me like nothing had happened. Days turned into weeks, and the atmosphere around his house grew heavier, like the air itself didn't want to cross his property line. I started noticing lights flickering inside his home at odd hours. More than once, I saw him carrying large boxes into his house late at night. Once I tried casually asking what he was working on. He smiled, the polite kind of smile that didn't touch his eyes, and said he was just sorting some personal things. Then he quickly changed the subject. But the real shift happened one night when I was taking out my trash. Just as I stepped outside, I heard him talking. Not just mumbling this time, full sentences but spoken in a low, careful tone. I thought maybe he was on the phone. But when I listened more closely, something felt off. His voice kept rising and falling like he was arguing, but I couldn't hear another voice responding. It was just him, talking, pausing, and then reacting as if someone else had spoken. I stood there for a few seconds, confused. The tone, the pauses, the emotion. It all sounded like a real conversation, but one where he played both sides. I should have gone inside right then. I should have minded my own business. But curiosity doesn't listen to reason, especially when something feels wrong and you can't understand why. The following week, things escalated in a way I couldn't ignore. My mailbox started receiving letters, blank envelopes with nothing written inside. At first, I thought it was a mistake, but every few days another one appeared. No sender name, no writing, no marks. Just blank paper. I didn't think it was connected to him until the day I caught a glimpse of someone slipping an envelope into my mailbox from my kitchen window. When I ran outside, the street was empty. But Mr. Hale's door was half open. I stood there, frozen, unsure whether I should knock or pretend I saw nothing. Before I could decide, his door slowly closed on its own, like someone gently pushed it from inside. I tried telling a friend about the weird things I'd noticed, but speaking it out loud made it all sound too dramatic, too strange to be taken seriously. So I kept everything to myself, hoping the strange events would stop. They didn't. The last moment that finally pushed me over the edge happened on a night when the power went out in the entire neighborhood. The street was completely dark. I stepped onto my porch with my phone flashlight, checking if anyone else was outside. That's when I saw it, Mr. Hale standing in the middle of the street facing my house. He wasn't moving. He wasn't speaking. He was just staring at me, his face barely visible in the darkness. I felt a cold chill run through my body. Before I could call out to him, he slowly turned and walked back into the shadow of his yard without making a sound. After that, I knew I couldn't ignore it anymore. Something was wrong with him, something deeper than a strange habit or an odd personality. And whatever it was getting harder for him to hide. I didn't know it then, but the moment I decided to find out the truth was the moment everything in my life changed. Because what I discovered about my neighbor wasn't just disturbing, it was something I can never forget, something I wish I never uncovered. And if I could go back in time, I wouldn't just ignore the signs. I would move far, far away before the truth found me first. I didn't sleep much after that night. Even when morning arrived and the sun filled the neighborhood with warm light, the memory of seeing my neighbor standing motionless in the middle of the street stayed with me like a shadow I couldn't shake. I kept telling myself that maybe he was confused, maybe he needed help, maybe the darkness made everything look worse than it actually was. But even those thoughts sounded weak. No normal person stands outside like that during a blackout, staring at a neighbor without saying a word. Still, I tried to go through my day normally. I made coffee, sat at my desk, tried focusing on work, but my mind kept drifting back to him. Every small sound outside made me look toward his house. A car door closing, a dog barking, even wind brushing across my windows. I reacted to everything. It felt like my senses were sharpened, like my body was preparing for something I couldn't name. The strange behavior didn't start randomly. Looking back, I realized the signs had been there earlier, long before the night I saw him outside. I just never paid attention to the little things. I remember the first time I saw the inside of his house, even if it was only for a split second. It was about a month after he moved in. I was bringing in groceries when I accidentally dropped a bag near the sidewalk. A few apples rolled toward his driveway, and before I could pick them up, he appeared out of nowhere and grabbed one. He crouched down with this stiff movement, almost like he wasn't used to bending his knees. He handed the apple back to me with a smile, but his eyes looked distant, unfocused. Behind him, his front door was open just enough for me to see inside. There were boxes everywhere, stacked higher than they should be, but the strange part wasn't the clutter, it was the lighting. The inside of his house was filled with dim yellowish light that looked nothing like regular bulbs. It felt heavy, almost dusty, like light that had been trapped too long. He quickly shut the door the moment he noticed me looking. At the time, I thought he was just a private person who hated people seeing inside his home. But now, those quick reactions made more sense. He wasn't just private, he was hiding something. The more I tried to ignore everything, the more the universe seemed determined to remind me that something was off. A few days after the blackout incident, I woke up to find my trash cans neatly lined up on the curb. The problem was, it wasn't trash day and I hadn't taken them out. Someone had moved them during the night. I checked with the neighbors. No one touched them. No one even woke up during the night. But when I glanced at Mr. Hale's house, I saw him standing behind his curtain, holding it just slightly open. The moment our eyes met, he let the curtain fall. The pattern kept growing. I'd hear footsteps outside my window late at night, slow, measured steps that paused every few seconds. I'd check the time and see 2 a.m., 3 a.m., always the hours when everything should be silent. I'd look outside, but whoever it was moved before I could catch a glimpse. Sometimes, though, I didn't need to see anything. I just knew. One afternoon, I decided to talk to another neighbor, an older lady named Marcy who lived across the street. She had lived there long before I moved in, and she usually knew everything about everyone. I didn't want to sound paranoid, so I casually asked if she ever talked to Mr. Hale. Her eyes shifted to his house before she answered. "Not really," she said slowly. "He keeps to himself." "Has he always been like that?" She hesitated for a moment. "He's different," she finally said. "Not rude. Not unfriendly. Just different. Like he doesn't fully understand how to act around people." I asked if she ever noticed anything strange, but she shook her head and smiled like she didn't want to get involved. "Some people are private," she said. "It doesn't always mean something bad." But the way she spoke told me she had seen things too, things she didn't want to talk about. The mystery around him felt like a fog that was spreading, slowly covering everything nearby. I started paying more attention to his house, hoping I'd catch something that made sense. Instead, the little details I noticed only confused me more. Some nights, a soft humming sound came from his basement. It wasn't loud or rhythmic, just a steady, low vibration that you could feel more than hear. Other times, the lights flickered in his house like he was using some kind of old electrical system. Once, I saw him coming back from somewhere with a toolbox and what looked like old wires wrapped around his arm. When I asked if he needed help, he gave a simple no and walked inside without another word. One evening when I took my dog for a walk, I passed his house and saw him sitting on his porch. He wasn't doing anything, just sitting perfectly straight, hands on his knees, staring at his driveway. He didn't blink for the entire time I walked by. My dog, who usually greeted everyone, suddenly growled and pulled back, refusing to go closer. I felt him trembling through the leash. When I looked at Mr. Hale, he was still staring ahead, but I noticed something. His breathing was too slow, too controlled. Like he was trying to mimic calm breathing but hadn't practiced enough. I walked away quickly. The next morning, I found another blank envelope in my mailbox. But this time, something was different. The paper inside wasn't blank, it had a faint fold in the center, almost as if something had once been written and then erased. I held it against the light, but I couldn't make anything out. Still, it didn't feel accidental. It felt intentional, like someone wanted me to notice the fold. Like someone wanted me to know the message had been removed. Around this time, I started having a strange feeling whenever I walked near his house. Not fear exactly, but more like pressure, like the air got heavier, denser, harder to breathe. My body reacted before my mind did. My steps slowed. My chest tightened. Something inside me warned I shouldn't get too close. But curiosity does strange things to people. It pulls you deeper even when every instinct tells you to stay away. I found myself watching him more, trying to figure him out. I noticed he left the house at unpredictable times. Sometimes early morning, sometimes late at night. He carried bags, boxes, sometimes nothing at all. But no matter when he left, no matter what he carried, there was one thing he always did. He looked around before stepping outside, scanning the street like he was making sure no one was watching. I wasn't the only one who sensed something odd. Another neighbor, Jonah, mentioned in passing that he once heard metal clanking sounds from inside Hale's garage late at night. Not hammering, not building, more like someone sorting through old machinery. But whenever he tried casually asking what Hale was working on, Hale would give short answers and end the conversation quickly. Despite everything, nobody had solid proof of anything. Nothing illegal. Nothing openly wrong. Just a man who acted strangely, lived strangely, and carried a presence that felt heavier than normal. But deep down, I knew it was only a matter of time before something happened. Something that would explain all of it. I just didn't expect it to begin on such a normal day, when I was walking past his house with my grocery bags, not paying much attention, and heard something from inside, something so quiet I almost missed it. A voice. A whisper. Not his. And that was the moment I realized the truth wasn't going to stay hidden much longer. The whisper I heard from inside his house stayed in my mind for hours. It wasn't loud and I couldn't make out any actual words, but it was enough to make me freeze on the sidewalk. I stood there with grocery bags cutting into my fingers, trying to convince myself it could have been the TV or a radio. But it didn't sound like either. It sounded too close, too soft, too real. I took a step closer without meaning to, leaning just slightly toward his window when the curtain shifted. Not all the way, just enough for me to see the top of his head as if he was standing right behind the glass watching me. I didn't wait to see more. I hurried back home and locked my door. For the next few days, that whisper replayed in my mind. It brought a whole new layer to the mystery. If he wasn't talking to someone, then who, or what, was inside that house? And if he was talking to himself, why did it feel like there was someone else answering? I tried to shake it off by focusing on normal things, work, chores, errands, but the neighborhood itself felt different now. Even people who didn't mention Mr. Hale directly seemed uneasy. The street felt quieter, like everyone was subconsciously aware something strange was happening, yet no one wanted to say it out loud. One afternoon, I noticed Jonah sitting on his porch looking troubled. He usually played guitar in the evenings, but the porch was quiet. When he saw me, he gave a small nod. "You hear anything weird lately?" he asked casually, but his tone didn't match the casualness. Caught me off guard. "Weird how?" He rubbed the back of his neck, hesitating. "I don't know. Sounds. At night. Like someone moving furniture around but slower. And sometimes, like someone talking." For a moment, I didn't know if I should tell him what I had heard. Finally, I nodded. "Yeah. I've noticed stuff too." He let out a breath like he'd been holding it for days. I thought I was going crazy. "No," I said. You're not the only one. We looked toward Hale's house at the same time. The windows were closed, curtains drawn, nothing out of the ordinary. Yet both of us stood there staring like we were waiting for something to appear. Jonah leaned in a little. Do you think something's wrong with him? I don't know, I answered honestly. But something isn't normal. Before he could say more, his dog, a usually calm golden retriever, ran toward Hale's yard, barking at nothing. The fur on its back stood up. When Jonah called it back, it came running with its tail between its legs, whining as if scared of something it couldn't see. Jonah didn't laugh it off the way people usually do. He just looked at me with a quiet seriousness. From that moment, the tension in the neighborhood grew. Subtle things kept adding to the unease. Shadows moving behind his curtains. Lights flickering in only his house. Little rustling noises near my fence late at night. A distant thump that woke me up at 3 a.m. and left me sitting in bed, heart racing. And then there was the smell. It started faint, like old air or dust. But over the next few days it became stronger. Not rotten or dangerous, just strange. Like something metallic mixed with dampness. I first noticed it when I walked past his driveway. Then I smelled it again near his garage. It would disappear quickly, almost like it was carried by the wind, but it left me uneasy every time. One afternoon I saw him outside opening the trunk of his car. He had something wrapped in a thick cloth, long and narrow. I didn't know why, but watching him lift it into the trunk made me feel uncomfortable. He glanced at me, his expression unreadable, then slowly shut the trunk. Going somewhere? I asked, my voice feeling heavier than usual. Just errands, he said calmly. Too calmly. His tone didn't match his eyes. They darted around like he was checking if anyone else was watching. Need help with anything? I forced myself to say. No, he answered quickly. Thank you. He got into the car and drove off without another word. But when he turned the corner, I noticed something. A small piece of the cloth hanging out of the trunk caught under the lid. It fluttered for a moment before disappearing from sight. That night something new happened. A soft tapping sound echoed from my backyard around midnight. Not like knocking. More like someone lightly brushing against the wooden fence. I got up, grabbed a flashlight and walked to the back door. The tapping stopped as soon as I turned on the light. I told myself it could be a raccoon or the wind, but my body felt tense in a way I couldn't explain. I stepped outside and scanned the yard. Nothing. But when I turned toward Mr. Hale's property, I noticed his back porch light was flickering again, glowing weakly like a heartbeat. Then it went out completely. For some reason, that little blackout felt more unsettling than anything else so far. The next day, I decided to do something I hadn't considered before. I tried talking to him again. I knocked on his door, expecting him to answer immediately like he usually did. He didn't. I knocked again. Still nothing. Just when I began stepping back, the door finally opened a few inches. He peeked out, only one eye visible. Yes? He asked softly, almost whispering. I just wanted to check if everything's okay, I said. You haven't been out much. He stared at me for a few seconds too long. Then he opened the door wider. His house behind him was darker than usual. No lights on, no sound, nothing. The air felt heavier near the doorway, like stepping too close would swallow me into that darkness. I'm fine, he said. Just tired. His voice sounded different. Dry. Raspy. Like he hadn't used it in days. If you ever need anything. I won't. His answer came quickly. Too quickly. He closed the door before I could say anything else. That same night, I saw movement in his upstairs window. A silhouette. But it wasn't shaped like him. It looked too tall, too slender, the posture too stiff. I blinked, thinking I imagined it, but when I looked back, the figure was still there, standing just behind the curtain. I felt something cold crawl down my spine. That wasn't him. But before I could look any longer, the curtain dropped as if someone yanked it closed. Moments later, I saw his front door open and Mr. Hale step out onto his porch, alone. He looked around the neighborhood with a strange alertness, as if he sensed something but couldn't pinpoint from where. He didn't see me watching from my dark window. Or maybe he did. Maybe he always did. The mystery around him wasn't just about strange noises or odd behavior anymore. It was woven into everything around him, the house, the atmosphere, the things left unsaid. And every time I thought I reached the limit of weirdness, something new added another layer to the puzzle. Whatever was happening inside that house wasn't just unusual. It was getting stronger. And I had a terrible feeling that sooner or later, it was going to break out into the open, whether I was ready for it or not. In the days that followed, I felt the atmosphere in the neighborhood shift in a way that was almost impossible to describe. It wasn't just quiet anymore, It felt watchful, like the air itself was holding its breath. Even normal noises like a car door or someone walking their dog felt out of place. My attention kept drifting toward Hale's house, no matter how hard I tried to focus on anything else. The silhouette I had seen in his upstairs window stayed in my mind. I replayed it over and over, trying to convince myself it was just him standing at an odd angle or a trick of the light. But I knew what I saw. And the more I thought about it, the more certain I became that whatever was in that room wasn't him. One evening, while the sun was setting and the street glowed orange, I saw him leaving his house. It was rare to see him at this hour. He usually stepped out either early morning or late at night, but not during sunset. He walked fast, almost hurried, looking back at his house every few steps like he expected something to follow him. I stayed behind my curtains watching carefully. He didn't get into his car this time. He walked down the street until he disappeared around the corner. That alone unsettled me. Where was he going without driving? And why did he look so tense? The moment he vanished from view, I felt something I hadn't felt before. An urge to know the truth strong enough to push past the fear. Before I could change my mind, I stepped outside. The street was silent, the air cooler than it should have been for the hour. His house stood dark, quiet, almost too still. I approached slowly, feeling my heartbeat rise with every step. I wasn't planning to go inside, I just wanted to look to see if there was something obvious I had missed. But as I got closer, I noticed something strange. His front door wasn't fully closed. It was pulled in but not latched, a small gap revealing darkness behind it. That tiny opening felt like an invitation or maybe a warning. Either way, I couldn't walk away. I reached the door and gently pushed it. It opened without a sound. The inside of the house felt colder than outside, like the air had been sealed in and forgotten. The dim yellow lighting I once glimpsed was gone. Only the faintest bit of daylight from outside reached inside, stretching across the cluttered floor. "Hello?" I whispered, though I wasn't sure why. No response. The hallway was filled with boxes, stacked high and leaning slightly as if they had been moved recently. Some were open but most were taped shut. I tried to read the labels but there were none. No writing, no markings, nothing to explain what was inside. As I stepped in further, the floor creaked under my weight. The sound echoed deeper into the house, disappearing somewhere in the shadows. For a long moment, everything stayed silent. Then I heard it. A soft shift upstairs. Not loud, not aggressive, just a gentle, barely there movement. Like someone taking a slow step or adjusting their weight. I froze. The house should have been empty. I watched Hale leave. I was sure of it. I stood completely still, listening carefully. Another small sound followed. It wasn't threatening, but it wasn't comforting either. It was careful, deliberate. I backed toward the doorway, telling myself I needed to leave, but just before I turned, something caught my eye. A faint glow leaking from the crack under the basement door. A pale bluish light, flickering slightly like it was struggling to stay lit. I shouldn't have gone closer. Every instinct in me said to walk away. But curiosity pushed harder. The basement door was cold when I touched it. Not just cool, cold. Colder than the rest of the house. I felt a shiver run through me. I slowly turned the knob. The door opened an inch before something stopped it from moving further. Not a lock, something physical blocking it from the other side. Through the narrow gap, I saw nothing but blue light flickering, spreading across the floor like reflections on water. And then I heard it. A whisper. The same whisper I heard that day by the window. This time it was closer. My breath caught in my throat. I couldn't understand the words, it was too soft, too fast, but the tone was unmistakable. It wasn't angry. It wasn't calm either. It was urgent. Someone or something was whispering in that basement. Footsteps suddenly echoed upstairs again. This time clearer. Slower. Measured. Moving from one room to another, heading toward the top of the staircase. That wasn't Hale's walk. I backed away from the basement door, heart pounding as the footsteps grew louder, descending one step at a time. My hands shook. I looked at the front door, calculating if I could reach it fast enough. Halfway down the stairs, the footsteps paused. I heard breathing. Soft, controlled breathing. But not like an exhausted person. More like someone trying to imitate normal breathing, practicing it. I had to leave. No. I moved quickly but quietly toward the exit. Just as I reached the doorway, something shifted again upstairs, a shadow moving against the faint strip of light. I slipped outside and shut the door behind me as gently as I could. The house went silent again, but the silence felt heavier now. Watching. Waiting. I made it back home, locked my door, and stood there for minutes trying to steady my breathing. My mind raced with questions I didn't want the answers to. Was someone else living in that house? Had Hale been hiding them all this time? Or was it something worse, something I couldn't explain? I tried calling Jonah, but he didn't pick up. I sent him a message telling him I needed to talk. No reply. The night came fast, and with it, a tension that settled over everything. I couldn't stop pacing. Every minute stretched longer than the last. I kept glancing out my window toward Hale's house. At some point past midnight, I saw movement again. His porch light flickered on for the first time in hours. Then his front door opened. Someone stepped out. But it wasn't him. The shape was wrong. The movements were too slow, too careful, as if the person was still learning how to walk. They turned their head toward my house, pausing as if they sensed they were being watched. A chill ran through my entire body. Then, without warning, they took a small step forward. And another. Coming straight toward my home. That was the moment I realized the mystery wasn't contained inside Hale's house anymore. Whatever was in there, it was moving toward me now. And there was no sign of Hale anywhere. I should have felt relieved after surviving the last incident, but the silence inside the Department of Unknown Crises felt wrong in a way my body recognized before my mind did. The lights flickered, not in the usual old building kind of way, but in pulses as if responding to something breathing behind the walls. I was halfway down the hall, still replaying the briefings in my head, when my badge vibrated twice. That never happened. A hidden message appeared on the tiny screen, written in a format used only when a situation was too dangerous to speak aloud. Do not trust internal reports. Second anomaly active. Origin unknown. I stared at the words, a chill crawling up my spine. We had just contained one anomaly. I watched it get sealed. I signed the paperwork. Nothing should have been moving, expanding, or waking up without clearance. It felt like the rules of the department, the same rules everyone swore by, were being rewritten moment by moment. As I walked toward the operations room, I noticed everyone was avoiding eye contact. People who normally talked too much whispered only in short fragments. A knot tightened in my stomach. Something bigger was happening and I wasn't being told. Again. I scanned my badge at the door, expecting it to open immediately. Instead, the lights overhead flickered again. Then the door unlocked, on its own, without the scanner turning green. A small detail, but small details in the department were never accidents. I pushed in carefully, half expecting alarms. What I saw instead froze me. The giant digital map, normally filled with patterns, data points, and threat markers, showed a single blinking red dot. Right in the center of the building. Not outside. Inside. Almost directly beneath us. A sinking feeling cut through me. The containment vault. I moved closer to the display. A voice behind me suddenly spoke, low and strained. It wasn't supposed to react this fast. I turned to see Director Hale, calm, severe, always in control, looking shaken for the first time since I'd joined the department. He didn't even try to hide it. We thought the first anomaly was isolated, he said. A closed case. But the readings never stopped. They changed. Changed how? I asked. He hesitated. That was the real red flag. Hale never hesitated. It's mimicking internal systems, he said quietly. Almost like it learned us. My pulse jumped. At first I thought I misheard him, but the tremor in his voice confirmed it. The anomaly wasn't just expanding, it was adapting. Copying. Studying. Which meant it wasn't just a threat. It had a motive. We rushed toward the containment level where security doors had already sealed shut. My badge wouldn't scan. Hale's didn't either. From inside the locked hallway, something hit the metal with a dull thud. Not violent. Not frantic. Controlled. Like whatever was in there was announcing its presence. A soft glow lit up under the door, pulsing in the same rhythm as the lights upstairs. And then came the real twist. My badge vibrated again, but this time, the message wasn't from the department system. It wasn't from any system. The display glitched, then formed a sentence that made every hair on my body rise. You left something unfinished. My throat went dry. That wasn't a random message. It was personal. It referenced the last incident. The one I thought I'd resolved. The one I convinced myself couldn't possibly come back because I did everything right. I followed every rule. I locked every door. But apparently I missed something. Hale grabbed my wrist, staring at the message. Who sent that? I don't know, I whispered. But I did know. Deep down I knew. Something from the previous anomaly had followed me back. Or worse, attached itself to me in a way the department didn't detect. The glow under the door grew brighter, almost warm. A faint vibration hummed through the floor, subtle but unmistakable. It wasn't trying to break out. It was trying to communicate. We can't let it reach the main grid, Hale said sharply. If it learns the full structure of this facility, it won't stay contained. Another thud came from inside the hallway. This one softer. Almost like a knock. Hale pulled me back, but the glow pulsed once more and my badge flashed again with a new message. We're not done. No signature. No source. No logic that matched anything we kept in our systems. I felt a cold tightening in my chest as the truth settled in. The main conflict I thought was over wasn't just continuing, it was evolving. The second anomaly wasn't separate. It was connected to me. And if it was adapting through me, then the Department of Unknown Crises had a problem far bigger than containment breaches. It had me. And now the stakes were higher than anything I'd faced here. What the department feared wasn't that the anomaly would break free. It was that I might help it, without even knowing. The hallway lights dimmed completely. Then a single word flashed across the containment display in front of us. Climax. Not a threat. A promise. The real conflict had just begun. And whatever was behind that door wasn't waiting anymore. The moment the display flashed that single word, everything in the containment hallway went quiet, like the building itself was holding its breath. I felt Hale's grip tighten on my arm, but I pulled away gently. Something inside me knew this final moment wasn't about force or protocols or emergency lockdowns. It was about understanding what I had been avoiding since the beginning. Whatever was behind that door had followed me because I left something unresolved, something tied to me more than to the Department of Unknown Crises. The glow beneath the door faded, replaced by a softer rhythm, almost like a heartbeat syncing with mine. For a second I thought I imagined it. But Hale stepped back, sensing the same stillness. Before we open that door, he said quietly, tell me if there's anything you didn't report. I swallowed hard. I had reported everything, or at least everything I understood. But there was one moment I hadn't spoken about because I didn't know how to explain it. When we closed the first anomaly, I said, I felt something, stay with me. A flicker of it. Not dangerous. Just aware. Hale's expression shifted from frustration to understanding. Not anger. Not blame. Just a tired acceptance that some things inside this department didn't fit clean descriptions. That's why it's here, I added. Not to break out. To finish whatever it started. He paused, then stepped aside. Then go ahead, he said. But take it slow. My hand reached toward the emergency override. The lock clicked, soft but final. The door slid open by inches and a warm breath of air brushed against my face. I expected something terrifying or overwhelming, something that matched the alarms and scanning systems. But instead, the hallway beyond was empty. No lights. No shapes. No physical presence. Just a shimmer in the air, faint as dust caught in sunlight. As I stepped forward, the shimmer responded, gathering itself, shaping into a soft wave that mirrored my movements. It wasn't hostile. It wasn't broken. It wasn't trying to escape. It was waiting for me to acknowledge it. You followed me, I whispered. The shimmer pulsed gently as if nodding. Why? A warmth spread through the air, carrying a sense rather than words. Not fear. Not confusion. Something closer to gratitude. This anomaly, this strange, adaptable presence, hadn't come back to harm anyone. It had come back because part of it had bonded with the moment I faced it. It wanted closure just like I did. The department always taught us to treat every unknown as a threat. But standing there, I realized not every unknown wants to destroy. Some just want to be understood. And maybe that was the real test all along. Hale stood behind me, unusually silent. He must have sensed it too, that this wasn't an attack. This was communication. A final message. A reminder that not all crises were violent. Some were emotional. Some were lessons in facing the parts of ourselves we try to bury. The shimmer moved closer, swirling gently until it reached my chest. I didn't flinch. The warmth spread through my skin, deeper, mixing with the rhythm of my heartbeat. I felt memories, moments of fear I hadn't processed, choices I rushed through, responsibilities I carried alone. The anomaly wasn't consuming me. It was helping me release the tension it had absorbed from me in the first place. It had never been dangerous. It had only been reflecting what I carried. Slowly, the shimmer scattered, dissolving into soft threads of light. They drifted upward like faint dust trails and vanished into the ceiling, leaving nothing behind but a peaceful silence. The crisis was over. But more importantly, the cycle was complete. When the last specks faded, the hallway lights flicked back to normal. Alarms reset automatically. The digital map upstairs blinked from red to neutral. Everything returned to the ordinary stillness of the department. Hale approached, his footsteps steady again. "That wasn't containment," he said quietly. "That was connection." I nodded. "It wasn't trying to break out. It was trying to go home. Or make sure you did." His words hit deeper than I expected. The department dealt with unknowns every day, but we rarely talked about the unknowns inside ourselves. The fears, the pressure, the things we avoid because they're too heavy. This whole time I thought I had fought an external anomaly. But part of this fight had been internal, tied to my own unresolved fear of failing, of missing something, of not being enough in a world full of impossible tasks. We walked back to the operations room. People looked relieved, even confused, but no one questioned what happened. The department had a rule: when an anomaly ends peacefully, you don't chase explanations that don't want to be found. Later that night, after long reports and final checks, I stood alone in the empty hallway where the shimmer last appeared. For the first time since I joined the department, I didn't feel the heavy pressure of uncertainty. I felt grounded, present, stronger than before. I realized something important, something the department never taught directly but expected us to learn eventually. Working with the unknown isn't just about crisis management. It's about understanding ourselves so we don't become part of the problem. It's about empathy, patience, and being willing to sit with fear instead of running from it. The real keyword wasn't danger or anomaly. It was acceptance. Before leaving, I placed my hand on the cold metal door. Not as a farewell, but as acknowledgement. Whatever it was, wherever it went, it left a part of its message with me. Face the unknown, and the unknown will face you back with truth instead of fear. As I walked out of the building, the city looked calmer than usual. I breathed in the night air, no longer carrying the weight of unanswered questions. The Department of Unknown Crises would always have mysteries waiting, but this chapter, this strange and unexpected journey, finally had a natural ending.